There comes a moment in every life when the heart stands at a crossroads. One path urges you to keep knocking on a door that has long been closed, hoping that persistence will somehow awaken love, respect, or attention. The other path whispers something quieter, something far more difficult to hear because it demands courage instead of hope. It tells you to turn around, lift your head, and walk away with the dignity that was yours before anyone ever chose to ignore you. Many of us have mistaken chasing for love. We have believed that if we explained ourselves one more time, sent one more message, waited one more day, or sacrificed one more piece of ourselves, someone would finally see our worth. But a person who repeatedly ignores your presence is not asking you to prove your value. They are revealing the place they have chosen to give you in their life. And no amount of running after someone can change a decision that has already settled in their heart. There is a quiet tragedy in constantly seeking validation from people who have already withdrawn it. Little by little, you stop asking whether they deserve your energy and begin asking whether you deserve theirs. That is how self-doubt enters the soul, not with a loud crash, but with the soft footsteps of repeated disappointment. You begin measuring your value by unanswered calls, unread messages, empty promises, and conversations that never come. Before long, you forget that your worth existed long before their silence. The greatest mistake is believing that being ignored means you are not enough. It does not. It simply means that you are looking for recognition in a place where it no longer lives. Flowers do not stop blooming because one passerby refuses to notice them. The sun does not rise each morning to earn applause. Rivers do not change their direction because someone fails to appreciate their beauty. Nature understands something we often forget. Value exists independently of acknowledgement. Today, I invite you to challenge one of the most exhausting habits we carry, the habit of chasing people who have already chosen distance. Not because letting go is easy, but because your peace is too precious to be traded for someone's indifference. The strongest people are rarely the loudest or the ones who hold on the longest. They are the ones who know when love has become begging, when patience has become suffering, and when hope has become a prison built from their own longing. They choose themselves, not out of pride, but out of profound respect for the life they have been given. Your worth is one of the few things in life that should never be placed in another person's hands. Yet many people unknowingly do exactly that. They begin to believe that being noticed means they are valuable, being appreciated means they are enough, and being ignored means they somehow fall short. This quiet misunderstanding shapes countless decisions, influences relationships, and steals peace from hearts that were never meant to depend on someone else's approval. The truth is far simpler and far more liberating. Your value existed before anyone recognized it, and it will remain long after someone fails to acknowledge it. Think about how often people measure themselves by the reactions they receive. A message goes unanswered, and suddenly they question whether they said something wrong. A friend grows distant, and they wonder if they are no longer interesting enough. Someone they deeply care about becomes cold and unavailable, and instead of recognizing the other person's choice, They begin searching for flaws within themselves. This is how self-worth slowly becomes tied to circumstances that were never within their control. They mistake another person's behavior for a reflection of their own value. But people ignore others for countless reasons that have nothing to do with the person being ignored. Sometimes they are distracted by their own struggles. Sometimes they lack emotional maturity. Sometimes they simply do not share the same level of interest or commitment. And sometimes they have already made room in their lives for different priorities. None of these explanations have the power to define who you are unless you allow them to. A person's inability or unwillingness to appreciate you does not erase your kindness, your intelligence, your compassion, your dreams, or your potential. Imagine a priceless painting hidden in a dark attic where no one sees it for years. Its beauty does not disappear because it goes unnoticed. Its value does not decrease because people walk past the building without knowing what is inside. The painting remains extraordinary whether it is admired by thousands or seen by no one at all. Human worth works in much the same way. Recognition may reveal value, but it does not create it. Attention may celebrate your qualities, but it is never the source of those qualities. The danger begins when you spend all your energy trying to convince someone else to see what they have already chosen to overlook. Every attempt to earn their attention sends a quiet message to yourself that your value depends on their response. Little by little, confidence begins to fade. You become more concerned with changing their mind than protecting your own peace. Instead of asking whether they deserve a place in your life, you become consumed with proving that you deserve a place in theirs. People who truly appreciate you do not make you feel as though your existence is a competition for their attention. They may be imperfect. They may become busy or distracted from time to time, but genuine respect always finds a way to communicate itself. Healthy relationships are built on mutual effort, shared understanding, and consistent care, rather than one person endlessly chasing while the other continues to walk away. There's great strength in recognizing that not everyone will choose you, and that is perfectly acceptable. Every person carries different values, experiences, preferences, and paths. Being overlooked by one individual does not mean you are unworthy. It simply means your place was never meant to be defined by their acceptance. The world is filled with people who will recognize qualities that others fail to notice, opportunities that will allow your gifts to flourish, and relationships where your presence is welcomed instead of tolerated. When you stop measuring your worth by someone else's attention, something remarkable begins to happen. You become less anxious about being noticed and more committed to becoming the person you are meant to be. You invest your energy in growth instead of approval, in purpose instead of validation, and in peace instead of pursuit. The opinions of others lose their power to determine your happiness because you finally understand that your value was never waiting for someone else's permission to exist. And once that truth settles deeply within your heart, you no longer feel the need to run after those who refuse to see what has always been there. There is a painful illusion that many people fall into when someone begins to ignore them. They believe that trying harder will somehow restore what has been lost. They send another message, make another phone call, offer another explanation, or sacrifice another part of themselves, convinced that enough effort will eventually change another person's heart. What they often fail to realize is that chasing silence rarely creates connection. Instead, it creates more emptiness, because every unanswered attempt slowly drains the very peace they are hoping to recover. Silence has a language of its own. It is not always cruel, but it is often clear. When someone consistently chooses not to respond, not to engage, or not to make space for you in their life, they are communicating something through their actions. Words may be absent, but behavior speaks with remarkable honesty. The mistake is believing that silence is an invitation to chase harder, when in many cases it is simply a sign that the relationship no longer exists in the way it once did. The more you pursue someone who has emotionally stepped away, the more your focus shifts away from your own life. Instead of investing in your dreams, your friendships, your family, and your personal growth, your thoughts become occupied by someone who is offering nothing in return. You begin replaying old conversations, searching for hidden meanings, wondering what changed, and imagining different ways to earn their attention. Hours become days, days become weeks, and before long, you realize that your happiness has become dependent on someone else's response. This constant pursuit also creates an unhealthy imbalance. Relationships are meant to involve mutual effort. Both people should feel seen, heard, and valued. When only one person continues reaching out while the other remains distant, the relationship slowly transforms into a one-sided struggle. Instead of feeling connected, you begin feeling exhausted. Instead of experiencing love, you experience uncertainty. Instead of finding comfort, you find yourself living in constant anticipation of a message that may never arrive. One of the greatest costs of chasing someone who ignores you is the gradual loss of self-respect. Every time you ignore your own emotional needs in order to prioritize someone else's indifference, you quietly teach yourself that your feelings matter less than theirs. You begin accepting behavior that you would never encourage a friend to tolerate. You make excuses for repeated neglect, convincing yourself that patience is the answer, even when patience has become another name for self-abandonment. Ironically, chasing rarely brings people closer. In many situations, it creates even greater distance. A person who has already withdrawn emotionally may feel pressured rather than inspired by constant pursuit. The more you try to hold on, the more they pull away, leaving you trapped in a cycle of hope followed by disappointment. You mistake persistence for strength, when true strength sometimes means recognizing that not every door is meant to remain open. There is also a hidden emotional cost that often goes unnoticed. Constant rejection slowly changes the way you see yourself. You become more hesitant to trust, more afraid of being vulnerable, and more likely to question your own value. What began as a desire to save one relationship gradually begins affecting every relationship that follows. The silence of one person echoes into every future connection because you carry unresolved doubt wherever you go. Freedom begins the moment you stop chasing answers that someone has no intention of giving. It begins when you accept that closure does not always arrive in the form of a conversation. Sometimes closure is found in recognizing repeated patterns, believing consistent actions instead of temporary words, and choosing peace over endless uncertainty. The energy you once spent trying to convince someone to stay can now be invested in building a life where your happiness is no longer held hostage by another person's attention. The people who truly belong in your life will never require you to exhaust yourself just to earn a place beside them. They will value your presence, communicate with honesty, and meet your effort with effort of their own. Until those people arrive, the greatest gift you can offer yourself is the courage to stop chasing silence. Because every step away from someone else's indifference is a step back toward your own peace, your own confidence, and the life that has been patiently waiting for your attention, self-respect, is not something that appears in dramatic moments. It is built quietly through the choices you make every day about what you will accept, what you will tolerate, and when you will decide that enough is enough. One of the clearest signs of self-respect is knowing when to walk away from someone who consistently ignores your presence, your efforts, and your feelings. Walking away is often misunderstood as giving up, but in reality, it is choosing to protect the part of yourself that deserves kindness, dignity, and peace. Many people confuse persistence with strength. They are taught that if they care deeply enough, they should never stop trying. While perseverance is valuable in pursuing dreams, goals and meaningful work, relationships follow a different principle. Love, friendship, and respect cannot be forced into existence through endless effort from one side. When only one person continues reaching out while the other remains distant, persistence gradually transforms into emotional exhaustion. At that point, walking away is not an act of defeat. It is an act of wisdom. There comes a moment when you must ask yourself an honest question. Am I fighting for this relationship, or am I fighting against someone's decision? The difference matters. A relationship facing temporary challenges can often be repaired through honest communication and mutual effort. But when someone repeatedly shows through their actions that they are unwilling to invest in the connection, continuing to chase them only delays the acceptance of reality. Respecting another person's choice, even when it hurts, is often healthier than trying to change a heart that has already moved in another direction. Walking away also requires courage because it means letting go of hope as it once existed. Hope can be beautiful when it encourages growth, healing, and perseverance. But hope becomes harmful when it keeps you trapped in situations that repeatedly diminish your confidence. Some people spend months or even years waiting for someone to become the person they imagined, instead of accepting the person they have consistently shown themselves to be. They hold on to memories instead of facing the present. They cling to potential while ignoring reality. Every time you choose to stay where you are not valued, you send yourself a silent message that your needs can wait. Over time, this message becomes a habit. You begin lowering your standards, accepting less than you deserve, and convincing yourself that any amount of attention is better than none at all. Self-respect interrupts that pattern. It reminds you that your emotional well-being is not less important than someone else's comfort. It teaches you that protecting your heart is not selfish. It is necessary. Walking away does not mean you stop caring. It does not erase the memories you shared or pretend that the relationship never mattered. You can still appreciate the good moments while accepting that they no longer define your future. Strength is not measured by how tightly you hold on to something that is slipping away. Sometimes strength is measured by how peacefully you release it, trusting that your life is bigger than one person's inability to see your value. There is a remarkable freedom that comes with choosing dignity over desperation. Instead of waiting for a text that never arrives, you begin investing in your own growth. Instead of constantly wondering why someone does not choose you, you begin choosing yourself. Your energy returns. Your confidence slowly rebuilds. You rediscover interests that were neglected, reconnect with people who genuinely care about you, and remember that your identity extends far beyond one relationship. The people who truly belong in your life will never make you feel that respect must be earned through endless sacrifice. They will meet honesty with honesty, effort with effort, and kindness with kindness. They may not always be perfect, but they will never leave you questioning whether your presence matters. Knowing when to walk away is not about closing your heart to others. It is about opening your heart to the truth that your dignity is worth protecting, your peace is worth preserving, and no relationship is worth losing yourself for. Because the moment you choose self-respect over endless pursuit, you begin building a life where your value is no longer determined by the people who fail to recognize it, and where every step forward becomes a declaration that your heart deserves to be welcomed rather than repeatedly overlooked. There is a quiet truth that becomes clearer as people grow through emotional experience. The right relationships never make you feel as though you are constantly auditioning for a place in someone's life. When a connection is healthy, it does not require you to repeatedly prove your worth, chase attention, or beg for basic acknowledgement. Instead, it feels steady, mutual, and natural, where presence is appreciated rather than questioned. The idea that someone must be pursued endlessly to remain in your life is often a sign that the connection itself is unbalanced, not that you are lacking something. Many people spend a great deal of time chasing those who are inconsistent, distant, or emotionally unavailable. In doing so, they begin to normalize imbalance. They become accustomed to being the one who always reaches out first, always apologizes first, always makes adjustments first, while the other person simply responds when it is convenient. Over time, this dynamic creates emotional fatigue. It quietly teaches the heart that love must be earned through struggle instead of shared through mutual effort. But real connection does not operate like a competition. It does not ask one person to run while the other stands still. The right people do not require you to shrink your needs or silence your feelings just to maintain their presence. They do not disappear when life becomes complicated, nor do they leave you guessing about where you stand. Instead, they communicate, they show up, and they make their intentions clear without forcing you to decode mixed signals or chase clarity that should have been freely given. There is a profound difference between someone who is busy and someone who is absent. A busy person still makes effort, even in small ways. They may respond later, but they respond with care. They may have limited time, but they do not leave you feeling unimportant. An absent person, on the other hand, creates distance not only through physical silence, but also through emotional withdrawal. And when you find yourself constantly trying to bridge that distance alone, it becomes less of a relationship and more of an emotional imbalance. The right people bring peace, not confusion. Their presence does not make you anxious or uncertain about your value. You do not find yourself overanalyzing every message, waiting for approval, or questioning whether you are being too much or not enough. Instead, you feel grounded. You feel seen without having to perform, heard without having to repeat yourself, and valued without having to demand it. It is important to understand that mutual effort is not about perfection. Every relationship has moments of misunderstanding, distance, or imperfection. However, what defines a healthy connection is the willingness of both individuals to return, to repair, and to care consistently. When only one person carries the emotional responsibility of keeping the bond alive, the connection becomes fragile and eventually unsustainable. One of the hardest lessons to accept is that someone's inability to meet you where you are does not always reflect your worth. It often reflects their capacity, their readiness, or their priorities. The right people will not leave you questioning whether you matter to them. They will show you through consistent actions that your presence is not something they are tolerating, but something they genuinely appreciate. When you stop chasing those who are inconsistent, you begin to notice the difference between effort that is forced and effort that is natural. You begin to see how exhausting it is to try to hold on to connections that require constant justification. And more importantly, you begin to understand how peaceful it feels to be in spaces where you are not competing for attention, but simply being accepted as you are. The right people will never make you feel like you are too difficult to love or too complicated to understand. They will not require you to shrink your emotions or question your needs. Instead, they will meet you with consistency, respect, and clarity that does not need to be chased. Because what is meant for you does not hide from you, and what is genuine does not require endless pursuit to remain close. There is a turning point in life that quietly separates those who remain stuck in emotional cycles from those who begin to grow into something stronger, calmer, and more self-aware. It happens when a person finally understands that letting go of those who overlook their value is not a loss, but an opening. At first, it feels like emptiness, as if something important has been removed. But with time, that space reveals itself as possibility, and what once felt like abandonment slowly becomes the beginning of a better direction. Choosing yourself is not an instinct people are always taught. Many are conditioned to prioritize others, to tolerate neglect in the name of loyalty, and to remain in situations that drain them simply because leaving feels uncomfortable. But life has a way of teaching lessons that instruction never fully captures. After enough disappointment, enough silence, and enough emotional exhaustion, a realization begins to form. Staying in places where you are not valued does not preserve love. It slowly destroys self-worth. When you release people who consistently ignore you, you are not erasing history or pretending the connection never mattered. You are acknowledging that something has changed, and continuing to hold on is no longer an act of love, but an act of self-neglect. Letting go is not about bitterness or revenge. It is about honesty. It is the moment you admit that peace matters more than proving your importance to someone who has already chosen not to see it. What often follows letting go is fear. Fear of loneliness, fear of regret, fear of whether you made the right decision. These feelings are natural because the mind struggles with unfamiliar space. But within that space lies something powerful. The chance to rediscover yourself outside of someone else's attention. When you are no longer consumed by waiting for replies, interpreting silence, or adjusting your worth based on someone's behavior, your energy begins to return to you. Slowly, you start noticing things that were previously overlooked. You reconnect with interests that once brought you joy. You invest more time in your own growth, your goals, your friendships, and your inner peace. You begin to understand that your identity was never meant to be tied to someone else's response. Instead of constantly seeking validation, you begin building stability within yourself. That shift is subtle but deeply transformative. Letting go also changes the way you view future relationships. You become more aware of imbalance. You recognize effort that is one-sided more quickly. You stop confusing inconsistency with mystery and stop mistaking emotional distance for depth. Most importantly, you become less willing to abandon yourself just to maintain access to someone who does not fully appreciate your presence. Choosing yourself does not make life perfect, but it makes it honest. It removes the constant tension of chasing, waiting, and hoping for something that may never come. In its place, there is clarity. Even if the path forward is uncertain, it is no longer built on emotional confusion. You begin to understand that not every connection is meant to last, and not every absence is a punishment. Some endings are simply redirections towards something healthier. There is a quiet strength that grows when you stop forcing your way into spaces where you are not welcomed with genuine care. It is the strength of someone who no longer negotiates their self-worth based on another person's attention. It is the calm realization that your life does not pause for those who fail to appreciate it. As time moves forward, the absence of those who ignored you begins to feel less like loss and more like relief. You no longer measure your days by their presence or absence. Instead, you begin measuring them by your own peace, your own progress, and your own sense of direction. And in that shift, something remarkable happens. Life starts expanding again, not around someone else's indifference, but around your own decision to finally choose yourself.